Hi, it's Phil Bajera here from Action Coach Business Steps, and today we're going into session 2 of the importance of understanding your numbers. In session 1, we covered off the financial KPIs and why it's important that you understand the finance side of your numbers. And essentially, it's so that when you do know your numbers, you can make better decisions that are going to take you that step forward in the business. Today we're going to look at the operational KPIs, the sales and marketing KPIs, and then also the costings KPIs. So let's just start out with the operational KPIs, and the operational KPIs are the numbers that you can measure to establish how well the operations side of the business is actually performing. Now, some examples of the KPIs that you may want to include are, first of all, lost time injury rate, or your LTI. And the lost time injury rate is a very important number to know in your business because it has very far and wide-ranging implications. The last thing that you want to be doing in your business is hurting people. So the LTI rate, lost time injury rate, is an important measure. The next one I've got listed is overall operating efficiency, or OEE. And essentially what that does is, particularly if you're a manufacturing industry, it measures the overall operating capacity efficiency ratio of your equipment. Is it operating to its optimum? And it's important to set a goal level for your OEE. The next one is more of a logistics type of KPI, which is what I call DIFOT, delivery in full on time. So particularly if you're sending products out to your customers, your delivery in full on time is a great measure to make sure that you are fulfilling the orders that are being placed with you. Another operational KPI to measure is your absentee ratio, or absentee rate. So is measuring how often people are being absent from the workplace. And with most awards, the normal is allowing 10 days sick leave per person per year. Now, ideally, you don't want people taking their full 10 days. It's important that they do bank some for in the event that they really do get sick and they need to use it up. The absentee rate you can also use as a measure for people that are not so committed in coming to work each day, every day, and they in following proper HR procedures, it is something that you can counsel people on. The next KPI, operational KPI that I've got listed is manufacturing yield ratio. So, for a lot of businesses, it's important to understand the yield that you're getting from your raw materials. For example, you might be a food manufacturing business. So you want to measure your raw inputs to your finished goods inputs and measure what that yield ratio is. If maybe an engineering firm is measuring the yield ratio from the materials in to the finished goods, which then leads into wastage. Right? It's important to measure wastage. Wastage can be a very, very big cost to the business, and you need to be looking for ways that you can reduce the overall wastage, not only from an environmental point of view, but also from a cost control point of view. Another KPI that you could consider under operational KPIs is the employee turnover rate. So how often or how long are people staying with you? How often are people coming into the business and moving out of the business? So ideally, you don't want to have a high turnover rate with your employees. Another important measure, and I find, as I've been coaching with many businesses, not too many pay particular attention to the amount of overtime hours that they're actually working. And it's, there are times when doing overtime is beneficial to the business, but sometimes you can allow that to become a habit and continually do work with overtime. Unfortunately, it can be at a huge cost for the business. So understanding that overtime hours on a weekly, monthly basis is an important KPI to measure. Another KPI that I've listed here is customer complaint ratio. So how many customer complaints per unit sold are you receiving? The last thing that we want within a business is to be receiving too many customer complaints. So this is an ideal measure to measure that, and it will tell you how well the operations side of your business is operating. The next KPIs that we want to look at is the sales and marketing KPIs. The sales and marketing KPIs track how effectively your marketing and sales processes are working, and it helps identify what is working well so you can keep doing it, or what is not working so well so that it can be stopped and you can make changes for some other alternative activities that can be tested and measured. So some examples for sales and marketing KPIs may include your monthly sales growth. I think that's is self-explanatory. Your cost per lead, or CPL. So if you're doing a lot of advertising on any of the social media or Google platforms where you're paying for ads, you want to know what that cost per lead is. It then follows on that you then track the next KPI, which is cost per click, or CPC. So what is it costing you to have somebody click on your ad? A really important KPI to be measuring is your sales conversion rate. So for every lead that you get, how many of those leads are you converting into sales? So again, it's a great measure to see how effective your actual sales process is at converting those leads. Your marketing ROI, or your marketing return on investment. So we need to be, when we're doing a marketing campaign, we need to know how much money are we actually spending on that campaign, and then what's the return on the investment. So ideally, for every dollar that you put into marketing, you should be getting back more than $1 in revenue. So marketing should be seen as being an investment, not an expense. The next KPI that I've got written down for sales and marketing is customer acquisition cost. So how much is it actually costing you to obtain a new customer? And the cost for that is going to vary quite differently from industry to industry. So your customer acquisition cost is another important KPI. Another important one is your customer lifetime value. So what is the lifetime value of your customer, and which it measures is how often do they come back and buy from you again and again and again. And it's important to look at what is the overall lifetime value of having that customer. And then another important KPI is your sales pipeline value. So what is the total value within your sales pipeline for all the leads that you've got? And it's then important to measure how many of those are hot prospects, warm prospects, or if they're cold prospects, they should not even be included in that sales pipeline value. So testing and measuring and understanding your numbers in all of your sales and marketing activities is going to be really important in the overall success of building a successful business. The last area, and this is not a common one, but I find that is one of the most important KPIs that you need to be measuring, and that's your costings KPIs. This is an area that many businesses do not track, and one that has the highest risk and potential for financial losses in the business. The costings KPIs ensure that the costings are kept up to date with any movements that may occur in your material pricing, your labour cost rate, and your overhead recovery costs. So examples may include your monthly materials cost review. So each month doing a material cost review to make sure that you've got the latest pricing within your databases, particularly when you're applying those costings to new quotes or proposals. The next area is for project and job-based work is to then run an actual cost versus what the quoted cost as a variance. And this is a great KPI to make sure that you are actually achieving your quoted price when you actually get to do the work. On a number of occasions, I've worked with businesses that didn't understand this whole costing implications of their KPIs, and in fact what was happening when we had a very close look at it is the more work that they won, the more money they were actually losing, because they hadn't included some key components in their actual costings. And generally that will then relate back to this next KPI, which is the overhead recovery ratio. So for every job, you must be including as part of your costings an overhead recovery component. And the overhead recovery is all of those expenses that are not part of the cost of goods sold, which then you have to recover some way. For example, it might be your insurances, it might be your telephone costs, it might be motor vehicle costs, it's all of your wages on costs, and that's just to name a few. So understanding what your overhead recovery ratio is becomes really important, particularly when you're doing your costings. The cost of goods sold, or your COGS margin, is another area that you need to be measuring. So the cost of goods sold, or your COGS margin, is generally the first indicator that something is not quite right with your overall costings, with the revenue and the work that you're winning. So be quite conscious of what that margin ratio is, and really learn how to understand what the any increases might mean, any decreases might mean. And then the last part of the cost KPI is your labour cost ratio. So it's important to understand that in today's environment, our wages are continually going up. So each time they go up, have you adjusted your labour cost ratio in your costings models? So summing up then, on identifying the right key performance indicators that you need to implement, measure and track in your business, create a simple dashboard that allows you to consolidate all of those KPI results on one page. Ensure that you include a benchmark number that sets the goal that you want to be achieved for each and every particular KPI. The key to understanding and interpret what the numbers are indicating is to have a complete understanding of how the numbers are being measured, as this will in turn bring an understanding of what the numbers actually mean. Specifically, when you understand the meaning of your numbers, you can look for the trends that will then trigger a closer look at what is or may be happening that will lead to making a decision on what action then needs to take place to bring the numbers back in line. In Marcus Lemonas's words, if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. If you have any questions, please reach out. I'm here to help. So until next time, please remember to stay focused on understanding your numbers in the business and don't be afraid of them. Make your numbers your best friend. Bye now.